Welcome to today's digital dealer webinar. Today's webinar is sponsored by Drive Motors and is titled Show with Your Showroom, Sell with Your Website. Use e-commerce to increase PVR by $500. Today's webinar presenter is Matt Weinberg, Senior Vice President of Consumer Experience at Drive Motors. The webinar will run approximately 1 hour with a question and answer session at the end. Please welcome Matt.
Good afternoon, everybody. As Megan said, my name is Matt Weinberg. I've been in the auto industry for about 20 years, started in the retail side working in dealerships, and go back as far as remembering when AOL used to fax us internet leads with no email address on them. So I've been around for a long time, really excited to share with you about e-commerce and Drive Motors. Our agenda today is to talk about the fact that customers hate your current car buying experience. But it's okay, don't despair, because the future is here. And using technology, even though buyers are experts too, we can actually sell more in our dealerships by selling less. And we can use e-commerce to help increase profit per vehicle retailed. And of course, we'll share the next steps for those of you that want to learn more. So customers hate the current car buying experience. Sorry for those of you that may be offended by this, but this is just the reality. Less than half of 1% of surveyed car buyers said that they like the current car buying process. I'm going to repeat that. Less than half of 1%. That's astounding. Almost everybody that buys a car says, I don't really like this process. So let's talk a little bit about customer psychology and why this is. One of the things I love to ask dealers as I travel the country and sit down with GMs and dealer principals is if you could describe in one word how car buyers feel about car dealers, what would that one word be? And I get lots of really interesting answers, but the most common I get are dishonest, distrustworthy, shady. Some will go a little farther and say crooks or thieves. My favorite answer, though, is the word suspect. The reason I love that answer is because I don't think customers automatically assume that you're dishonest or distrustworthy because you're a car dealer, but they suspect that you might be. And all of these things actually lead to a psychological and visceral emotional response by the car buyer of fear. They're afraid that they're going to get taken advantage of. They're afraid that you might be dishonest. And this is a big reason why they don't like the car buying process. And so when I talk to my dealers, it's really important that whether we're just talking to a customer at our dealership or thinking about how we position our brand, position our dealership, position our marketing, that we always understand that this customer is always coming from this psychological and visceral emotional response that they automatically have when they think about car dealers, and that's of fear. But again, don't despair because the future is here, and e-commerce can actually help us stem the tide. It can help us alleviate this fear. A lot of what we're doing today as dealers is actually exacerbating it. What we want to talk today about is how we alleviate it. But first, let's talk about some of the pitfalls that we can fall into as dealers. And I bring up Borders Books because this is a company, along with Toys R Us, who many of you probably know just declared bankruptcy the last quarter of last year. Borders and Toys R Us both did something that was really detrimental to their business. They both outsourced online orders and fulfillment to Amazon.com. In other words, at certain points in their history, they actually trained the American toy buyer, and or in the case of Borders, the American reader, if you will, that the place to buy books online is Amazon. What does that have to do with our conversation? Well, it has a lot to do with our conversation because we as dealers are not trusted. We already talked about that. And many of us are actually renting Trust Score from third parties like TrueCar, Car Gurus, Cars.com, etc. What's interesting about that is as we give money to these third parties, they take that money and they advertise in the marketplace. And their messaging actually exacerbates this visceral emotional response of fear that the car buyer has. Even Carfax, for example, actually in their ads has a salesperson lying to the customer. So we need to be really careful about this, because what we're doing is we're training the American car buyer that if you want something that's trustworthy, that's transparent, that you need to go to a third-party website in order to get that. But again, the future is here. Technology has completely transformed how all of us on this webinar make purchases. It's completely transformed how we shop. And not just for cars, but for everything else. And to this point, I think many of us as car people believe that cars are different. You'll never be able to completely buy the car on a dealership website. But frankly, that's the same thing that we heard when internet leads first came, and that we heard when dealers started building websites. And so we need to recognize the fact that this technology is not going away. Customers have access to incredible amounts of information, and most importantly, their expectations are higher than ever. Every day, week, month that goes by, all of us are looking for faster, easier, and more convenient ways to shop for anything and everything, from groceries to TVs to cars. And if we don't, as dealers, start to transform the experience we're providing for our customers, then industry newcomers and disruptors like Carvana and Vroom and the third parties that we are renting Trust Score from will continue to take market share. 9 out of 10 car buyers said that they would be more likely to buy from a dealer that offers online checkout. Now, I want to stress something here. That doesn't necessarily mean that 9 out of 10 will use online checkout. It means that they're more likely to buy from a dealership that offers it. What's that distinction? The distinction is that when you give customers more buying options, you build trust and rapport with them. So as we're adding e-commerce to car dealers' websites, we're finding that even the customers that choose not to use it still begin to feel more comfortable with that particular dealership because they offer it. And so it's building trust and rapport even for the customers that aren't necessarily using it. But we can win more customers when we offer them buying options for that reason, because we build more trust and rapport. It also means that we need to think about adapting our showroom. I remember a time, if we kind of jump into a time machine here for a minute, I remember a time when internet leads in our business only represented 5% and then 15 or 20% of a dealership's business. And then when we fast forwarded probably a decade or so, GMs and dealer principals started to accept the fact that every customer that walks into a dealership showroom was an internet customer. And we're going to have that same evolution when we talk about e-commerce and online checkout. Not every single customer today is going to use the button. We're going to have a lot of customers that will still come into the dealership. But at some point, we're going to be saying the same thing, that everybody is an e-commerce customer. And this means that we need to also adapt our showroom and our sales strategy in our showroom to meet customer demands and to give them the option so that they can buy the car the way they want to buy the car. A great example of this is a company called Warby Parker. Check them out if you're not familiar with them. This company was founded by a couple of University of Pennsylvania grad students. One of them needed eyeglasses. He was stunned when he walked into an eyeglass store and they wanted $500-600 for a pair of glasses. He's looking at the glasses and he's like, how is this $500-600? This is crazy. And he set out to disrupt the industry, and they've done an incredible job. They're at $250 million in sales already, just a few years in. But most importantly for our conversation, after starting with an e-commerce model, they started to add retail. And at this point, only Apple has a higher per square foot sales figure than Warby Parker. So literally, in the entire country, they're number 2 in terms of sales per square foot. But the way they've been able to achieve this is by delivering the right experience to the customer. One of my favorite quotes from their CEO is that retail is not dead. Mediocre retail is dead. Let me say that again. Retail is not dead. Mediocre retail is dead. And so what they've done in their stores, which we can learn from, is they provide a no-pressure environment. They offer complete transparency, very consultative, and perhaps most importantly, they offer multiple ways to buy. You can buy it there in their retail store. You can buy it at a kiosk in their store off their website. You can have glasses shipped to your home, which you can send back if you do not want them. So they'll literally send you 4 or 5 pairs for you to try on, and then you can send them back. But the idea is that they are molding the experience based on customer desire, not based on their own desire. And this is absolutely critical because buyers are experts too. I know, for those of you that work in retail dealerships, that you have customers that walk into your showroom and know more about the car than the salesperson that they sit down with or the product specialist that they work with. And this means that we need to adapt our strategies because the customer has so much access to information and on average is spending 13 hours doing research. They're doing a lot of it on their smartphones. They're doing it on their tablets. They're doing it on their desktop. And almost 9 out of 10 say that when they walk into the showroom, they're fully prepared to buy a car. So we need to adapt on our side to give our salespeople the technology and tools that they need. And a big reason for this is because even those customers that say they want to buy online, 6 out of 10 still want expert advice from the staff at your dealership. So it's critical that we give them the tools that they need to answer these questions, that we give them the technology to do a needs analysis and then show the customer the vehicles that meet that needs analysis. One of the things that we're working on at Drive Motors with a top 10 mega dealer is how do we give your customers a more tablet experience where your product specialist can ask them questions like, what are you using the car for? So it's for outdoors. Customer says, I want red. They want a 3rd row seat, but they don't want to be above $500 a month. And we can instantaneously show the customer on a tablet the inventory that matches those needs. And the idea here is to sell more by selling less. I know that's kind of counterintuitive, right? But the idea is to make your showroom as enjoyable as an Apple showroom. How do we make it as much fun as when somebody goes to Apple? And if you think about it, and any of you that have been to a Tesla showroom, you know that this is what Tesla's doing. And it's working. Create a no-pressure environment. This is absolutely critical. People don't like pressure. Every single one of us on this webinar, at one time or another in our lives, we've been in a retail store, we've been looking around, and we've actually had a question. And an employee from that retail store walked up to us and said, can I help you today? And without even thinking, we turned to them and said, no, thank you, I'm just looking, and then immediately realized, oh my gosh, I totally had a question. They totally could have helped me. But our instinct as consumers is to say no in that scenario because we don't like high pressure environments. And this is a big reason why dealerships have not been able to provide customers with the experience that they're looking for. Instead, let the customer see for themselves. Greet them, of course, but use a tablet. Make it feel more like the same experience that you would get at an Apple store. They still want to try before they buy, right? So we still absolutely need our dealership showrooms. But if you think back historically, probably long before any of us on this call were in the car business, but still, let's get in our time machine again and let's go back even further than when we first started buying internet leads. Originally, showrooms were a place where you would go, touch the car, feel the car, look at the colors, and then you would order a car. That's why it's called a showroom. Today in dealerships, we're not showing, we're just selling. We are just, it's just sell, sell, sell. It's pressure, pressure, pressure. But 81% of customers say that they'd rather take a test drive on their own. They'd rather sell themselves. And again, I will continuously point back to think about your own behavior as a customer. None of us likes high pressure situations. And another way that we can sell more by selling less is by giving them the ability to buy the car their way. Meaning they can buy it in your showroom, they can buy it on a kiosk in your showroom, or we know that the average walk-in or up at a dealership is still closing somewhere in the 25 to 30% range. I'll occasionally talk to a dealership that will tell me 40 or 45%. I don't know how real those numbers are when you talk 45%, but that's okay. But bottom line is a lot of these customers walk out. So one of the really cool things that we can do with e-commerce is send them a link so that they can finish entering all their information and give us the rest of the things that we need to complete their purchase on their couch, in their pajamas, at home. Again, on their time when they're ready. And by the way, I want to be clear. Obviously, we still need to have structure at the dealership. There still needs to be a TO before that customer leaves, right? But we need to do it in a softer, more gentler manner. And when they say, look, I'm leaving, we need to offer them the ability to buy the car the way they want to buy the car, not have to come back in and go back through the process that they hate. So e-commerce can actually help us increase profit per vehicle retail. And it's helping gain a competitive advantage. And I want to point out here, I think that you have to be really selective with the e-commerce tools that you're choosing. And the reason that I say that is when we talk at Drive Motors about increasing PVR, I want you to understand that we're not seeing this with a lot of other e-commerce tools. And in fact, there's one well-known company who I just spoke to a dealership this morning. They had just launched with this company. And in the first month, the orders that came through this e-commerce tool, gross profit actually went down. And I think part of the reason that we see this at times is if we're not offering a true e-commerce experience and we're simply taking the traditional car buying process and moving it to the internet, for example, having calls to action like make an offer, all you're doing in that scenario is taking the current experience that less than half of 1% of car buyers like and putting it online. As opposed to taking an approach where we're saying, hey, let's try and change this process. Let's not move it somewhere else. Let's not move this terrible experience somewhere else. And so we're finding that we're actually seeing an increase. 7 out of 10 customers say they would buy more often if they could order a vehicle online. That's incredible. 7 out of 10 said they'd buy more often. That's absolutely huge. Really interesting. Study followed 19,507 automotive transactions. One of the things they asked the customer was, did you have access to realistic pricing and payment online? When the customer said yes to that question, on average, the dealer made $785 more gross profit. I'm going to pause for a minute and just remind everybody to send in questions. This is one of the topics here when I'm talking to dealers that typically lends to a lot of questions. So don't forget that you can go ahead and submit a question for our Q&A section at the end. But I want to point out here, when I was working retail, I used to tell my wife, the more the customer pays, the happier they are. And she used to look at me like I was crazy. She never to this day could understand this. For those of you that sell cars or have sold cars, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And typically the way that we try and describe this to people that don't understand is we'll use the phrase that a good deal is a state of mind, meaning if the customer feels like they got a good deal, then they did. And I bring that up in this conversation about realistic pricing and payment online and how it increases gross profit, because I would suggest to you that some of the people that said yes, they had access to realistic pricing and payment online may not have had access to realistic pricing and payment. And some of the people that said no, they didn't, actually did, but because they don't trust dealers, they didn't believe it. Why is that important to our conversation? It's important to our conversation because when it comes to e-commerce, and hopefully you've already read into this theme today, this is all about experience. And what I mean by that in relation to this is if we can give them an experience where they feel like we're being transparent, where they feel like we're being more trustworthy, where we give them the option to buy off the website if they want, we are building trust and rapport. And we know that trust and rapport in your showroom means a higher closing percentage and a higher gross profit. Why would it be any different in an e-commerce scenario? It's not. It's exactly the same. So when we offer customers the ability to see realistic pricing and payment, we're going to build trust and rapport, we're going to increase our gross profit, and we're going to increase our closing percentage. And we've seen this. We've seen one particular customer willing to pay $1,000 more to buy a car online. Why? Because it's faster, it's easier, it's more convenient, and it was transparent. This is a dealership in Texas. We added an e-commerce button to their website. In 52 minutes, which is a record for us, but in 52 minutes, this particular customer had already filled out an order and had taken delivery by the next day. This was a mother of 6, just like you and me, maybe a little bit more than you and me because she has 6 kids. I've only got 3, so maybe she's twice as busy as me. But we all have busy lifestyles. We all have a lot going on. She didn't have time or energy to go into a dealership and go through the hassle of buying a car. Customers will go out of their way for a great experience. And in this particular customer's case, she chose this dealership because they were the only one out of 14 local dealers that had the car that she wanted that offered online checkout. She told us she'd been shopping for several months and had been on the website of all 14 of these dealers. And as soon as she saw that online button, again, 52 minutes after we launched, she had already completed the e-commerce online checkout process. So we know that it works. It builds trust and it builds loyalty. Buyers will be more likely to add F&I upgrades. We have mastered this. It's really, really interesting to see how dealers have this big misperception, and I'll say it's the biggest misperception in this space, that automatically profit's going to go down. And I held this same misperception. I'll be the first to tell you that. What we have found is, at least the way that we have laid this out, that F&I upgrades actually increase. And if we rewind to our conversation at the beginning about customers' visceral emotional response of fear, that ties in here. When we offer the customer the ability to shop in their pajamas on their couch and look at F&I upgrades, they're actually more likely to buy them than if they go into the box at your store. And the reason for this is because if I'm the customer and I just said yes to a car, so I've already said yes to tens of thousands of dollars, and now at the typical dealership you say, okay, great, Matt, I'm going to go and I'm going to get John Smith, who's my F&I manager. He's going to load your deal, and then you'll go and you'll finish with him, okay? And then my salesperson, even if he's doing a decent job of quote-unquote babysitting, like we like to call it, right? We like to tell our salespeople, make sure you babysit the customer. Why do we do that? Because we know that customer is already having buyer's remorse. They're waiting to go into the F&I box going, did I make the right decision? Could I have gotten a better deal? I'm not sure. I don't know. I'm afraid that maybe I didn't make the right decision. And so they're sitting there actually having this visceral emotional response of fear all over again, even though they just said yes to the car. And then we take them into an F&I office and we try and sell them GAP and insurance and an extended service contract. And we know from studies that a customer that has not been exposed to F&I product is less likely to buy F&I product. And again, especially in this scenario, you may have the best F&I manager in the country who does the perfect GAP explanation. I'm still going to say, you know what? And I might not say it out loud, but I'm thinking to myself, I'm not sure if I can trust this guy. What he said makes perfect sense, but I'm still reeling from saying yes to tens of thousands of dollars worth of a vehicle. So I'm just going to say no for now, and maybe later I'll take a look, which, by the way, most likely, 99 times out of 100, I never do. However, if they've been exposed to F&I product, which in an online checkout, at least the way we have it laid out, that customer's more likely to buy, because what they're going to do is they are going to go and look at third parties, and they are going to see what the internet is saying about whether or not they should have an extended service contract or whether or not they should have GAP. And this makes them much more likely to buy. And it also means that you have two chances at the dealership to sell them F&I upgrades. One time, either when they're at home doing it online or using showroom technology and doing online checkout at a kiosk. And then a second time when they do go in with either the F&I manager, or if you're one of the stores that just uses one person to complete sales and F&I. Either way, you still have the opportunity. And my favorite example of this, real quick, and then we'll move on from this topic, is somebody that buys an extended service contract but doesn't get prepaid maintenance. Because it's such an easy conversation. Hey, Mrs. Smith, I noticed that you got the 6-year extended service contract but didn't take advantage of the prepaid maintenance. I don't know if you know this, Mrs. Smith, or not, but most of our customers that get the extended service contract also get the prepaid maintenance. And the reason for that is that you'll save X number of dollars over 5 years with that prepaid maintenance package. Is that something you want me to add back in? And now, again, if Mrs. Smith has done research on prepaid maintenance, she's much more likely to go, yeah, you know what, I did some research online, and if I'm going to service here, this does make sense. So, yeah, you know what, go ahead and add that. So, again, two opportunities. Another way it builds trust and loyalty is it means that these customers are more likely to use your service department. Why is that important? One of the things that I've learned from my friends at Lithia is that a customer that has serviced their vehicle at your dealership but has never bought a car from you is more likely to buy a car from you than somebody that's already bought a car from you but has never been in your service drive. I want to repeat that. A customer that has serviced with you but never bought from you is more likely to buy from you than somebody that's already bought from you but has never serviced with you. And by the way, the customer most likely to buy a car from you is somebody that has already bought and serviced with you. And so it's critical that we give the customer such an incredible car buying experience that they come back and use our service drive. Because this means that we're creating the ever sought after lifetime customer. And by the way, great news. 81% of Americans say that when a brand is more transparent, that they will try that brand's whole portfolio. For us in our industry, that means that they're much more likely to use the service drive if we give them a great buying experience. And again, this means that they will become more loyal customers, and they're much more likely to refer other customers. I shared the story earlier about how I used to tell my wife the customers that paid the most were the happiest. The amazing thing about that was that they also brought you referrals because they were happier. And so they were telling everybody, go see Matt at this Honda store. That's where I used to work. I used to sell Hondas. So we know that when customers have this incredible experience, like the one customer story I shared in Texas, she was telling all of her coworkers, right? We had a doctor in Atlanta that bought a Mercedes. He was telling everybody at his country club, I bought a car off of Mercedes-Benz Atlanta's website. So these are the customers that are going to be out talking about your dealership, your brand, and your customer experience. And there's nothing more valuable than that. Any of you that are on this call that are marketers know that those references are better than anything else that you can get. And so Drive Motors was found to help in this area. We literally were founded to help dealers with e-commerce and to help dealers give their customers an easier, faster, more transparent online car buying experience. But we also can help you do that in the showroom. And I want to stress again that we were founded to help dealers. That matters to me because I came from the retail side of the business like many of you. And I've seen far too many vendors who position their product to compete with dealers or simply to sell it to a dealer. And a lot of the tools that we see in this e-commerce space have actually been started to compete with dealers. Many of them said, hey, I had a bad car buying experience. This process stinks, which obviously I agree with that part of that statement. But they've tried to create third-party sites that actually compete with dealers. And as a dealer, if I leverage those, I'm now opening up to the customer competitive dealerships, competitive brands and makes, etc. And so that really matters to me. So maybe I've just stressed that a little bit too much, but having been on the retail side of the business, that was really important to me when I chose to come and work with the Drive Motors team. So what we're seeing again when we do this is an increase in profit per vehicle retailed, building customer relationships, and because we're being more transparent, we're not driving customers and teaching them that, hey, the place to get a transparent car buying experience is on a third-party site or with a disruptor like Carvana, et cetera. Now, I also want to share who our investors are. Some of you might be thinking, well, what does this have to do with anything? When I was an e-commerce employee in a top 10 mega dealer, one of the things when I looked for partners was, how forward-thinking were they? How fast were they going to be able to adapt and change as the market changes? And how well capitalized were they to do this? And how much were they going to listen to my feedback about their product? So for that reason, I want to share that we just raised another $5.5 million recently So most of our product that we have in the marketplace today is prior to that $5.5 million investment. But our investors are companies like Khosla Ventures. Mr. Khosla was the founder at Sun Microsystems and early investor in Square. And then Y Combinator on the left is really interesting. For those of you who are not familiar with them, they don't just invest in a startup. They essentially put a startup through a boot camp showing them how to be successful. Other companies besides Drive Motors that have been through Y Combinator are companies like Airbnb and Dropbox. So we're really well resourced and in a position to help change this marketplace. We just last week had a top 10 mega dealer in our offices in San Francisco. 2 weeks prior to that, I had met with them in their corporate offices, and they've been working with another company in this space for almost 2 quarters, according to them, on some features that they wanted to see in the showroom side of this technology. In 2 weeks, when they came to our offices, we had already completed building that. They were stunned with the speed in which our engineering and design team was able to move. And that's really important as you look at companies in this space. So I'll get off my soapbox now, but the next steps for you guys and gals is to download our ebook on Show with Your Showroom, Sell with Your Website. We'd also love to give you a demo of our showroom platform and our e-commerce platform. We call them Drive Showroom and Drive Checkout. So you can request a demo off of our website at drivemotors.com. And then you can also email us at info@drivemotors.com. And you know what? I love talking to dealers about this topic. So first of all, please, again, put your questions in that you have. Happy to answer them now. If you'd rather do that privately, or if you want me to personally show you our Drive Showroom or Drive Checkout, you can also email me at matt@drivemotors.com. And I'm happy to help in any way that I can.
Thank you so much, everyone, for attending today's webinar. Thank you to Matt and Drive Motors for some great content.